Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected. I'm here with Chris Stachiw, who I can't even really announce as a part of something because you touch so many different podcasts out there. We're going to break down all of them. Chris, thanks for doing the show.
Thank you for having me. It's not very frequently that I have to worry about being on camera.
Well, I'm glad you are, because you are a beautiful human, and it's nice to be able to see your face.
Thank you. Likewise. I'm not 6'5" like you, but I'm a shorter, beautiful human.
Well, you're also in a similar region of the United States, and it's nice to see somebody that's fairly close by.
Yeah, right. We're suffering together. You're probably suffering less than I am, but yeah, we're like 3 hours away. So that's a pretty good number compared to everybody else I work with who happens to be on the fun parts of the country.
Yeah, I'd say we suffer fairly equally. It just depends on the time of the year. I'll suffer in August, probably slightly more than you. You'll suffer in February, probably slightly more.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, I like the cold weather here. I'm never going to complain about the cold weather, but yeah, sometimes it can get a bit much in the Midwest, folks.
One of the things that I definitely want to talk about, because people have, if you've been watching this channel, you have not met Chris yet. We got a lot to discuss and introduce you to, because Chris, like I said, you are prolific in the amount of podcasts that you work on. But the big one, you just contributed to the Physical Media Advocate, the zine that we put out as part of this. And I want to say thank you. It was a fantastic piece, and I think introduces people to a part of cinema that most people don't touch on. Would you agree with that?
I would not only agree, but I would agree vociferously, because again, when Indian cinema is mentioned, for the most part, I think everybody goes to Slumdog Millionaire. At least they used to. Not anymore. Thankfully, we're living in a post-Triple R universe where Triple R made a lot of waves in the States, thanks to people like Josh Hurtado, who worked directly with SS Rajamouli to get it kind of up and over the line and into the kind of public zeitgeist in a way that Triple R deserved. But I watch a lot of Indian cinema. I watch Indian cinema every week. I have a bi-weekly, so once every other week, podcast called the Bollywood Cinema Club. And yeah, no, Indian cinema takes up a lot of my time, not just because every single one of those movies, for the most part, is at least 2.5, sometimes 3 hours, sometimes more than 3 hours. The movie that I did the write-up for in your zine is 3 hours and like 11 minutes, and it's a rom-com. So, and I don't watch rom-coms, at least not Western ones, but Indian cinema, their rom-coms they hit different, as they would say.
Well, on that note, tell us about the podcast. Tell us what you cover in it, and then we'll start talking about some of the other podcasts.
So the Bollywood Cinema Club, I've been doing it for, it'll be a year in January. I used to do, and I still do, Indian movies during the year on the Kulturecast, but it's only a month. But what's funny is I host on Spreaker, where all the shows that I post can be found, more specifically weirdingwaymedia.com. And I looked at the numbers about a year and a half ago for the show, and a lot of the downloads were the Indian movies. And so I was like, well, wouldn't it just make sense to do it as its own thing?
Focus, yeah.
Yeah, so I spent 6 months recording 33 or 34 episodes of the show. So it being every other week, that's a year's worth of content. I actually, the episode I ran this previous week, so the week of October 12th or 13th or 15th or whatever the fuck this week is, that episode was recorded in January of this year.
Wow.
Right. So to your point about being prolific, the way that one is prolific is by doing this every day or more than one time a day. But the Bollywood Cinema Club is definitely the thing that I'm the most proud of right now in terms of the things that I am actively interested and engaged in. And so every other week we just talk about a new or old Indian movie, not just a Bollywood movie, because Bollywood is more a specific term for a specific kind of Indian cinema, that being Hindi cinema. And I think, if you've not been exposed to Indian movies, I'm not going to say my podcast is a perfect way to get involved, but it's a step in the right direction. I feel like if you're on Netflix and Amazon Prime, you've probably had Indian movies suggested to you. I just don't think people are moving on those suggestions, because again, that would require you to watch something new that you haven't seen, and that means it might not be good, which I totally understand, because we all have not enough time to do the things we all want to do, and the last thing anyone would want to do is spend 2.5 to 3 hours on a movie that's not good. So that's more what I'm trying to do, is give people insight into Indian cinema, not just Hindi, but Telugu and Tamil, and giving them an idea of where they can go if they want to find more things like this, but also giving suggestions on things that are totally worth watching, because I don't think we've really talked about anything on the show that isn't worth checking out, other than I think 2 movies, and Heather Drain had the misfortune of being on both of them, unfortunately. One of them being Mahakal, which is the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, reimagining, ripoff, whatever you want to call it.
I still think it's worth watching.
I know. We talked about it. I think it's fun for what it is, but if we're talking about it being a good movie.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. But yeah, Heather was on that episode, and then she was on the episode where we talked about Circus, which has neither one of those episodes have even come out yet, actually. They were recorded so long ago. But that, for the most part, everything that I've watched and talked about on the show has been, please check it out. It is worth watching. You would be doing yourself a disservice by not watching it. So I try not to watch movies that are not going to be good either, because I want people to be able to watch an Indian movie, enjoy it, and by enjoying it, go watch other movies. I feel like If they watch it and don't like it, that door more or less closes. And I get it, but not all Indian cinema is boring and Sanjit Ray. A lot of it is just like the kind of stuff that we're watching here in the States, action movies, comedies, not as many horror movies, unfortunately. But I feel like that's changing.
So how does a gentleman from Nebraska just suddenly discover a love for Indian cinema?
So that's the fun part. I live in Nebraska. I am thankfully... phrases. I'm not from here. I have plenty of good friends here. I grew up, and I know you grew up, you grew up in Southern California, and I grew up in North Texas, but I was born in California, and then my folks moved when I was a kid. I grew up in North Texas, which when I was going to high school was pretty ethnically diverse. Now North Texas is very ethnically diverse, to the point where whole cities and communities are more Southeast Asian than, even Hispanic or white or anything else. Because again, North Texas has become a very big place to move to and have a job, especially in tech industries and other things like that. So I grew up around a fair amount of Indian kids in high school, be it Northern Indian or Southern Indian. And so I was exposed to their culture pretty early on. And for whatever reason, it's something that I gravitated towards. And I remember watching my first Indian movie proper on my way to India in 2011. And I kind of saw the movie. It was Entharan, which is Robo, which stars Rajnikant, and it's Bicentennial Man meets The Matrix meets The Terminator. All rolled into one. It's as insane as it sounds. It's a lot of fun. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. I believe it's on Netflix or Prime Video. But I just grew up with a lot of Indian friends, and that was something that I took interest in, because I tend to take interest in people and the things that they care about, and I am always that person who's asking more questions, which puts me in a position to then all of a sudden start caring about things I maybe didn't care about before. So that's the long answer to a short question. It's just I grew up around a lot of people who were Indian or Southeast Asian, and I ended up going to India, and on the plane to India, like I said, the first time I saw an Indian movie, and I kind of just fell in love with it from there. It's unlike anything else in the best way. And not every movie is going to be singing and dancing, but there's a lot of it, and that is part of it. And if that bothers you, probably don't watch Indian cinema. But also, if that bothers you, what the fuck is your problem? Like, that's my question. Like, my friend Dustin, who is on the show quite often, he puts it rather perfectly. He says, Indian cinema leaves room for fun, and the joy of filmmaking is still readily apparent when you're watching the film. I don't think that's the case with a lot of Western cinema anymore, for a number of reasons. But Indian cinema seems to have weathered that, and Indian culture has a very strong connection to cinema as well. I mean, it's an event. That's why the movies are so long, because you go and you want to It's a day. You're spending your day doing it. It's a thing that you go and do with your family. So again, we've kind of commodified the movie going experience in this country to the point where it's like, we're just going to go to the movies. But
Right.
in India, I mean, you can get food here in the States now, but we don't have intermissions during movies. They have intermissions in Indian cinema. I mean, it's a different way of approaching film, and it's a different cultural appreciation that I feel like more people would be able to understand if they were watching Indian cinema, because they really love movies over there in a way that, like, I think we like them here in the States, but they're not intrinsically part of our culture. People like movies, but in India, it's part of the culture. Everybody watches movies in India. I can't say the same for people here. I have run into plenty of people that say, I don't know actors and I don't watch movies. And it's like, well, I mean, for someone like myself or yourself who watches a lot of physical media or just things in general, that's a hard thing to understand. Like, I don't watch a lot of movies. Like,
right.
Okay.
So what do you do with your life?
Yeah, like you're just watching a lot of TV. You're just watching Seinfeld and Frasier remakes and retreads. I don't know. Like that's the thing for me is like I always kind of drag The Office, but it's like, why would you go and watch The Office for the 30th time when you could be watching new things that you've never seen that might push you as a film watcher or allow you to appreciate a culture that, again, you're probably not having a lot of exposure to. I mentioned this on the It Lives Inside podcast. I probably do take for granted my exposure to Indian culture comparatively to a lot of people growing up in this country. And especially people in the Midwest. Like, I ain't seen a lot of Indian folks around these parts, as they would say. But what's crazy is we have Indian movies being shown at our local movie theaters. So, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think where I live now is as conducive to appreciating Indian cinema outside of just doing it yourself, because people here have to be convinced to watch Indian cinema, and then they love it when they watch it. So huzzah. But no, that's a long answer to a short question.
And I mean, really got to touch on that culture point, because not to just hammer on Triple R, because that's what everybody wants to talk about for the last 2 years. But the big thing is it showed that people are willing to embrace it. It showed that people, not only just the film itself, but, you know, these videos of dancing and singing breaking out in fucking LA theaters of people that just loved the movie. And it's not like the entire audience was all Indian and this is something that they were prepared for. This was people that just genuinely got overtaken by the joy of the film.
Yeah. And, you know, I have spoken with some of my Indian friends about Triple R and they like it, but my white friends that I've talked to seem to be the ones who like the movie more. And it seems to like really, I don't know, it seems to really speak more to like the action movie sensibilities of the people that I know, but also like the kind of epic action, because that's a pretty epic movie, Triple R is. I'm curious to see if this will be sustained, because again, we've kind of seen these blips come and go, but like, will it be sustained further into people going from Triple R to maybe... Again, my suggestion, if you've seen Triple R and you want to watch something else that's an action movie that you can see kind of the frame of reference Western-wise, but appreciate it because it's something very different, is Pathaan, which came out earlier this year, which is Shah Rukh Khan essentially doing the Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible thing. It's Mission Impossible, but better, because Shah Rukh Khan is a much more charismatic actor than Tom Cruise could ever hope to be. And Tom Cruise is a very charismatic actor, but Shah Rukh Khan is just... India, if you watch an Indian movie and you're not immediately taken aback by how fucking charismatic all of the people are, how good looking everybody is, it's a different way of making movies. It feels like old school Hollywood. Actors are venerated in a way that is not, we don't do that in this country anymore. And it's because of the amount of people that are watching these movies that feel that they connect to these actors in such a tangible way that they're venerated like gods. Amitabh Bachchan, who's one of the biggest Indian actors up until the pandemic, and he's doing it again, on Saturday will come out in front of his house and wave to his fans. And then he goes back inside of his house. That's it. And people are there every weekend. Like, nobody is doing that here. That's not a thing. That's so not a thing that to say that out loud, which I have to multiple people, they're like shocked and stunned that that's the thing. Like, what? Why? Because he's venerated. Because people think that Amitabh Bachchan is worth idolizing, and I don't think they're wrong.
I think a part of what we've lost in the U.S. potentially is the fact that many of these stars are on Instagram selling us multi-level marketing products.
Sam Friedman and Tom Brady would love for you to lose all of your money. Yeah, I mean that's the cynical aspect of it. But I mean Ranbir Kapoor and all SRK and Amir Khan, they're all advertising stuff in India. It's in India,
Yeah.
and they're involved in politics. It's just in India. Again, it's hard to have an opinion about someone that's not in your country because you have opinions about people in your country. So you're worried about having an opinion about them first,
right.
Which is fine. Like, again, I understand that it's an uphill battle to try to get people to watch movies with subtitles, but come on, guys.
We should all be past that.
I would think so in 2023, but I know that that is still a thing that people will say, like, I don't watch foreign films because I don't want to read. It's like, oh my God, fine. But yeah, no, Indian cinema for me has become a passion, and it is something that like I said, I'm trying to foster a positive community around understanding and appreciating it through a Western lens, which is the only lens that I can offer because I'm not Indian.
And it's the one yeah.
Yeah, it's not any less valid if it's being appreciative. Not like, oh, this is fucking weird. Like, there's none of that on my show. The only dragging that we do is the dragging of people that don't like to watch movies with subtitles. And again, I don't know how else to say this, but get over yourself. Like, I'm not trying to be a dick, but if you don't watch movies with subtitles, you've closed off so much fantastic cinema. Not just Indian cinema, but German films, Japanese films, French New Wave. Like, if you only want to watch The Office, I guess your prerogative.
I guess.
Yeah.
So that's Bollywood Cinema Club. Links for that obviously in the description below. Please go check that out. Subscribe. Listen to every episode. Chris is amazing. Next, Kulturecast. There's so many things to promote and discuss, so I got to go through it quick.
Yeah, Kulturecast is just another movie podcast. I've been doing that since 2014, October of 2014. So next year it'll be a decade.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's I don't know.
You're really selling this one.
I enjoy doing the show, but it's definitely one of those things where, like, if we're not talking about new movies, it's really hard to like get people excited outright because it's like, well, we watch all kinds of different stuff, but we really do. I mean, the Kulturecast is more about highlighting things that I think and other people think are worth checking out that maybe didn't get the appreciation initially that one would assume. And the Kulturecast is not just my baby. I mean, it is, but throughout the year, I let other people program months because I think getting other people involved is more fun. And again, I don't know how many people are being given an opportunity to program a month of content that they don't have to edit, that they don't have to do anything with.
Right.
And I have no problem doing it. So Mike White, who is the host of The Projection Booth, which is my favorite movie podcast, and I think the superior, at least academic level movie podcast. Him and I work together. He's on my show fairly frequently, but yeah, like movie podcasts are, if you don't like movies, you're not going to listen. So if you like movies, you should check out the Kulturecast. But it's a labor of love like anything else. But I use it as an opportunity to watch movies I've never seen before. And, getting to talk about them often with the people who pick the movies, but, even more often, just two people who have never seen the movie having a conversation about it. So, but all the research is done. It's all very well researched. Again, everybody who I host with is very entertaining, yourself included. You were just on an episode of the show where we talked about No One Will Save You. I almost butchered the title of the movie again. But the Kulturecast, again, I don't want to just downplay it as just another movie podcast, but it is a movie podcast that you can listen to on the internet.
That's what we all love.
Right.
So Kulturecast, Bollywood Cinema Club, and you've got some others that you invest a lot of time in. Why don't you at least lay the floor on those? Maybe we won't go as in depth.
Yeah. So in terms of collaborative things that I work on a couple shows where I am essentially a host, not host/producer, not editor. So Midnight Viewing, which is a night gallery podcast, then Twilight Zone 85. That podcast is called Dreams for Sale. Did a Kolchak show with Mike White. And then right now We're working on a Barney Miller show and a Columbo show as well, which will take us, a couple more years to do. And then we have some other irons in the fire, collaborative stuff. But for the most part, everything I do outside of the Kulturecast, which is like the singularly me outside of the guests, is purely collaborative. So Scary Stories We Tell, which is very different from anything else I work on. It's like paranormal, supernatural, but talking about those things, not just talking about movie versions of those things. And that's it. I mean, again, like I show up on Mike's show from time to time. I show up on other people's shows from time to time, but I have plenty of things that keep me busy. I want to say I'm in charge of editing, posting, and doing all the work for 2 weekly shows, 1 bi-weekly show, and 3 or 4 monthly shows. So let's, keeps a girl busy. So.
Well, and not to mention when you record 68 episodes in a month or whatever, that's got to be a little intimidating.
Yeah, 33 podcasts in 6 months is for one show, mind you. I mean, I was still recording everything else for everything else. So yeah, it was a bit much, and it burned me out in a way that I'm still trying to grapple with. Because well, that's the thing. We talked about this, off air, but doing the whole podcasting thing can seem kind of isolated and alone.
Oh, very.
But working with other people, like that's why I say, the collaborative things I work on. Because for me, I like being collaborative and working with people and working together. And that's why I let people program months of my show, the Kulturecast. Because I mean, that the way it works is if you program the month, you also are given the opportunity to be on any episode that you want, including all of them. So if you program an entire month, if you want to be on every episode, that's your prerogative. So I mean, again, I don't know who else is doing that for anybody else. It's not like I'm some sort of, Mother Teresa or anything, but I understand that people are always wanting people to talk about the things that they care about or talk about the things that they care about. And I don't know, short of starting your own show, how you could just have somebody allow you to do that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, very good point. And yeah, completely agree on the podcasting thing. Obviously, I produce a couple as well. And the way that podcasting is, just by the nature of what you're doing, you hardly ever interact with people other than for that initial recording. But so many people, that's all they focus on. But there's so much extra time that goes into it, just than that, we'll say somewhere between 45 minutes to 2 hours of time.
I would say I've used this equation to explain it to people. For every minute of content that's recorded, it's probably 3 minutes to 4 minutes of work that needs to be done with the content. Something like 1 minute requires 3 minutes to get it where it needs to be, or whatever.
If you're doing it right, yeah.
I don't know why you would do it if you're not doing it right, which I think you would agree with. I mean, again, I don't want to be the guy who's like, well, you should take pride in your work. But if I'm listening to your show and I can hear like burps and farts and shit,
right?
Like, come on, man. Like, people are listening to this, and it's representative of you and who you are, and like. Burps and farts are fine, but if it's meant to make you laugh, okay. But I don't know. It's a lonely profession if you don't live in Los Angeles. Like, that's what it feels like, right? Like, we know that there are so many people that get to go podcast in a group, in a room, and they're all sitting there yucking it up. I've seen Theo Vaughn on TikTok, as I'm sure plenty of you have. But for me, the podcasting experience has always been what we're doing now, like a digital thing. I mean, you and I could probably do something in person together, given the proximity to one another that which we live. But yeah, like the people that I know, like Mike, we've never recorded together in person. I've recorded in person with 2 of the people that I consider myself close with in the podcasting world, at least in terms of people I've worked with for a while. And it's weird to record in person with them too. It's a very weird feeling to like look over and see the person next to you and be like, oh, we're doing the thing here. As opposed to we're doing the thing here.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people that don't consider this don't realize the fact that not only does it create a different dynamic, because now instead of a computer screen, you're kind of like instinctually going to interact with them, even though obviously verbally you're already going to do that. But on top of that, it changes your workflow on everything and creates new hurdles that you don't always have to face because you're just in a silent room. But now, if you got 3 people in the same room, there's a lot more to edit.
Yeah, exactly. Which I do take. I probably don't realize how much I take that for granted here as a podcaster, doing everything remotely. So yeah, I can just mute myself and it's not a problem, which is not a thing if you're recording in a room. I guess it could be, but yeah, there's a reason people are doing mixing and editing for those people, because there's a lot more that needs to be done than with people that are recording separately on separate tracks in quiet houses far away from one another.
I love how this went into the podcast technical zone instead of talking about.
I mean, you mentioned how many podcasts I work on, so I figure might as well mention some of the things that I've picked up in case anybody listening wants some free information on how to do this. So,
well, and the other thing, you kind of mentioned it, but Weirding Way Media is sort of a pretty decent sized name, especially because of Mike's involvement. And most of that is based around you. So,
well, and we have 20 plus shows, and I only make up probably 7 of those. Yeah, I mean, we have people on the network that I've never met. I mean, people on the network that are doing shows that I've never been on, like 80s TV Ladies, Filmentaries, Feminine Critique. Those are just 3 that stand out that I've never. I guess I've been on 80s TV Ladies once, but yeah, no. I mean, there's a lot going on at Weirding Way Media, and new stuff coming after the first of the year. We got three new projects that are launching after the first of the year as well. Podcasts. So yeah, there's always something to listen to, always something to find at Weirding Way Media, and yeah, my fingerprints are everywhere, but I tend to like to wipe them off so that it's less apparent how involved I am.
I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about establishing the love for Indian cinema. What about just movies in general? Has that always been a thing for you?
Yeah, I was one of those kids who could rattle off actor names from a young age. I don't know why it sticks out to me, but I remember watching Armageddon with my parents and some family friends, and Jason Isaacs is in that movie as like a random dude at NASA who's working with Billy Bob Thornton. And I remember saying, I remember saying to my dad, like, oh, that's the villain from The Patriot. Because it is. And then it, obviously, it becomes Draco Malfoy's dad in Harry Potter. But for whatever reason, I just think of that like Jason Isaacs specifically, but I have always liked movies. It's one of those like core things of my being. You can see it because this is a fucking video thing. I mean, I have the decorations in my house, or my house that my wife and I own, are movies and movie posters or movie art or Mondo fucking posters that I spent way too much money on, or Mondo posters that you can't get anymore because they're too expensive, like a Buckaroo Banzai poster. So yeah, nice. I am a movie person, like in a way that I'm sure you are, given the amount of physical media that you own. But yeah, movies, I don't remember what the first movie I ever saw was. I don't have that memory. I remember that I saw Independence Day in theaters. I remember I saw Apollo 13 in theaters. I don't know if those are early enough to be considered first movie-going experiences for me, but movies have been a part of my life since as long as I can remember, as Henry Hill would say. So,
well, most of the time I'm talking to people that are already involved in physical media. I've never asked you this. How deeply entrenched are you in physical media?
I'm on the Cassandra Cat, which was released by Kino Lorber's second run
in the UK
last year. And then I'm also on All My Good Countrymen, which is another Czech new wave film. Nice. I think that was the second run film as well. So I've been on 2 commentaries, which the first commentary I recorded was in April or May of 2020, and I got to do that thanks to Mike White, and that to me is crazy. Like that to me is like I've said it before and I say it again. Like I could die happy having been on a physical release of anything. Just 2 so far, but not anything that's like, again, or 3. I guess the thing I'm the most proud of is being on the Kolchak the Night Stalker Blu-ray from Kino, which did come about because of, well, mine and Mike's involvement with Kolchak tapes, and shout out to Amanda Reyes for getting us that gig, who I know you've spoken with as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, Kolchak and then some Czech new wave films, but the big one is the Kolchak Blu-ray for sure, which came out last year, the year before. So Mike and I, we did the Kolchak tapes show. We covered the entire Kolchak the Night Stalker run and the remake, and then I think it was like a year later, they were like, "You want to do a commentary?" And we were like, "Hell yeah!"
Hell yeah.
So, I mean, that was for me was always the kind of dream, and I always joked about it with Mike, and I think I said it on the Kolchak tapes. Like the goal for anybody doing any of these podcasts has got to be like being involved with the show coming back in some substantive way. I mean, Kumail Nanjiani was on the X-Files because of his X-Files podcast that helped revitalize interest in the X-Files. So it's not impossible to think that could happen. I got what I would consider to be the next best thing, which is being part of a physical release for something I care a lot about. So yeah, it's not as many as I would like, but at least I have one that is something that I care about immensely. So the thing I would love to be on would be like a Goodfellas Blu-ray,
Right.
or the Freaked Blu-ray if it ever came. If a version of Freaked came out, that was a Blu-ray, that was a Criterion. I would do everything in my power to be on that Blu-ray, because that for me that's one of the movies that I will trot out and say is my favorite movie if I know someone might actually know it. So
wow.
yeah.
There was a Freaked Blu-ray from Anchor Bay that came out years ago, and now that thing, I think eBay, and eBay prices on that are like $160, something crazy.
I have the DVD and I have the Blu-ray, but I was hoping that somebody else would pick it up, because that came out. I mean, it came out to Anchor Bay, so if that gives you any
somebody
idea,
has to.
Right. If it gives you any idea when that came out, it came out so long ago that it was released by Anchor Bay.
Yeah.
I bought it before I went to college. So that was like 2007. Like that's how long it's been out of print. But I have a Mondo poster of Freaked hanging in my hallway. So, and I have on my laptop bag the Ricky Coogan pin that's essentially the poster. So, I mean, again, like, physical media is fantastic, and especially if you want to get involved with things that you love and being a part of it permanently, I don't think physical media is a bad option if you want to figure out a way to get involved with the movie making industry in a way that is easier than being on set. I think being someone who is knowledgeable about a movie and can speak to it on a commentary is a pretty nice feather in one's cap.
How was the commentary process for you? Did it feel fairly natural because it was Mike?
Yeah. How dare you? Yes, no. I mean, here's the thing. He is the one who offered the opportunities to me. Well, the Kolchak thing was someone else offering that to us, so that's kind of the weird one. But the other two, it was essentially like recording an episode. I mean, we watched the movie at the same time and talked about it while watching it, and I enjoyed it. I didn't do any of the back end work, thankfully. That was, like you mentioned, Mike White of the projection booth was doing all of that. It's different. I have edited my own commentary once. I did like a trial run on the Patreon for the Kulturecast. We did a commentary for Possession, the Andrzej Zawalski film, which is a real fun movie if you've never seen it. It's
a big upper.
Yeah, it's a real upper of a movie. Every time I watch it, I walk away from it going, man, what a fun movie that was. But we did that a couple years ago, I want to say during the pandemic. We offered that as like a Patreon bonus. And I've thought about doing it like once a year just for shits and giggles, because it is fun, but it is also an exhausting kind of work that I'm not a huge fan of, because the way you have to edit a commentary it's a pain in the ass, to put it that way, in terms of getting everything to line up and sync up and make sure that it works and flows the way you want it to while you're watching the movie, and also not getting in the way of the movie. And there's a lot of things that go on to making a commentary work that I'm not super privy to, because again, I didn't do much of the back end work, but it was fun. I would suggest, if anybody is trying to get involved with the back end of movie making, this is a very easy way to do it, and a very, I think, economical way too. You don't really have to have a lot. You have to have a microphone and a computer to be able to do commentaries, and something worth saying, a opinion or an idea worth contributing. Because again, ultimately, anything that anybody does in a commentary, it is effectively their opinion too, unless they're talking straight facts. So
one of the easiest ways to make that worthwhile is a lot of films have never, literally ever, had anything analytical said about them. So take the time, do some research, look at something from 1968 that has never been on Blu-ray or something and take care of it. See if you can do some research and enough to talk about the entire runtime.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You don't have to constantly be jabbering either, which is the other thing that I think, again, like part of it is like letting the movie play and letting the movie do its thing. So I enjoy commentaries. I would like to do more of them, but I think that's what any of us would say is like, I would like to be involved in more physical releases.
For sure.
Frankly, what I would like is to have a company that would allow me to release the things physically that I would want to release. But I mean, right, that's what you're doing. So, that's, I mean, again, production company, podcast network, any of those terms are interchangeable with what I'm doing with everybody at Weirding Way, because I would like it to be less just podcasts and more other things. Because not saying podcasts don't have an infinite ceiling, but audio only does have an infinite ceiling, unfortunately. So.
And a lot of people still just plain don't ever listen to podcasts. That's the other hard part.
I know. People want to watch stuff. I get it. Like I get it. I get those comments on the YouTube episodes of the podcast that get posted on, automatically through Spreaker, and the comments of like, "Where's the movie?" It's like, not here, obviously. Right. Like, this is a podcast episode. Nobody ever promised you, we're going to show you the movie. We're talking about it. So, I don't know. Sometimes I guess the expectations are a little off, but audio only does seem to have a little bit of a ceiling to it for sure.
But it helps when you have 19 different tentacles reaching out to different shows. Good job.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, that's the thing. I mean, when you start a podcast network, you want to find the show that is going to be the show. And you already mentioned it. It's Mike's show. I mean, like I said, the projection booth, not to downplay the quality of my show or the things that I work on, but I work on plenty of projects and I bring an intensity to them that I always bring. Mike has an intensity for a singular project. And that's like a nuclear warhead with a guided laser on it. Like, it's going to always go exactly where you want it to. And that's Mike's expectation, is he wants to dig deep as far down as you can to get as much information, because like we've mentioned, it's time and effort spent that other people don't have to do.
Right.
And you're giving them your synthesis of it. And to Mike's credit, he doesn't get in the way of the synthesis. He synthesizes it and then gives his opinion, which I think is the more important thing about being a commentator on movies or analyzing movies or critiquing movies, is my feelings and the movie itself, and keeping those things separate. And in this day and age of subjectivity and objectivity's line being essentially destroyed, being cognizant of it, I think you would agree, is something that is important now. Like, this is my opinion.
Right.
But the movie is objectively not good also. Like that, those are two separate statements that can be made. So,
well, and I think you and I both seem to have some sort of skill in that, because it goes back to something we talked about earlier already, which is about that empathy when watching some of these movies. You understand that you're watching different cultures. You understand that you are embracing film from a different time, from a different mindset than you are used to and those around you are used to. And that's where things like people not watching with captions, I got a little less patience for, because you're kind of showing you don't have that empathy.
And you don't have the drive to engage on a larger stage than just Western movies.
Right.
Like, Western movies, I'm not saying they're bad, but it all feels very one note after a while. And when someone does something different, we applaud them. But it's few and far between where anyone is really doing anything novel and groundbreaking anymore, because everything has been done. I mean, I'm not trying to bemoan it. It's just the reality.
It's true. It is true. Well, we're all leading up to this big discussion about found footage, and this was your idea. So I got to find out why found footage.
I actually, let me ask you, what is your perception? What is your perception of other people's perception of found footage? Like, what do you think?
Most people hate it.
Okay. I would agree with that sentiment. I don't hate it.
Me neither.
I'm not saying it's like my favorite thing of all time. Maybe not far from it, but I feel like for me, found footage is a weird thing that has so many different directions that it can go, that it's, you know, at times guerrilla filmmaking, at times cinema verite, at times it's both, at times it's neither of those things.
Yeah.
But yet it's all in that same umbrella term of found footage. I don't know what it is about found footage. I think found footage has been something I've always kind of been into subconsciously. And when I think back on the things that like really got me animated back in the day, or things that I was like going out of my way to track down, a lot of it was found footage. So, some of the things I remember watching as a teenager that really, like I said, really not set me off, but definitely catalyzed opinions within me that I have not changed, but they've only grown more complex, but they're still the core idea. Started with something like a found footage movie that came out in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
A pretty big found footage movie that came out in that span of time. So
I think there's a couple that most people tend to be like, this one is pretty good. And then the rest, they're like, oh, it's a gimmick. That makes it awful. And
why didn't they put the camera down? Why didn't they put the camera down? Which is a fair fucking question. Like, if you can get over the hump of why haven't you put the camera down in the first 5 minutes of your found footage movie, you're off to a pretty good start. But if you can't ever answer that question, then the audience is just going to keep asking.
Yeah, that is true. And I think there's a lot of them, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, that have lended pretty well to that answer. It seems like a lot of people are making these in a way that they're building an answer in for that question.
Right. It's part of the framing device as opposed to a gimmick. And, you know, I'm not going to blame Oren Peli, but Paranormal Activity ushered in a wave of things that were not as good as Paranormal Activity. And Paranormal Activity 1 is fine. I like it just fine, but I mean, again, in a lot of ways, it's like the first Saw movie. Like, could we just have it be that thing? And it doesn't need to be another 10 things. Not that I'm complaining about Saw 5 or 6, whichever one has Peter Outerbridge in it is probably my favorite Saw, so you have to get through 4 other ones to get there. But I don't know, the plot contrivances in found footage seem to be so obvious, unless they're going out of their way to deal with it, that like it's hard to ignore how contrived found footage can be. The worst found footage, the best found footage, just makes it part of it, and you're not sitting there going, well, why is it the way that it is? So I think the more we talk about found footage, the more people will realize how much they actually enjoy it and how much they don't hate it. But it is also a genre that is very easy to hate. For me, found footage is the equivalent, like a found footage movies are like Wii games. Yeah, you remember the Wii, the Nintendo Wii. You remember how all those games were just coming out for the Wii that nobody had ever heard of? You know, Jerry and Nidus Rice's dog football. Like, who's playing this? Who is this for? It's super cheap, being made on a low budget. Like, that's found footage. For a lot of people, found footage is a cheap, crappy movie that is being made cheaply because they can't afford any of the budgetary needs to make a movie that seems interesting or has a point to it. I remember when I was in high school talking with a friend of mine and us being like, we should do a found footage movie. We could film it on our phones. Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of found footage, is you can film it on your phone. And because you're filming it on your phone and the expectation is this is footage from my phone, you don't have to do anything with it. It can just be footage from your phone. But then you watch movies that are just footage from your phone and they're not good. So, I mean, again, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
I think the allusion to the Wii games there is maybe the most apt thing I've heard about found footage, because a lot of those, they are kind of historically built on these engines. They're basically a foundation for a game that they put a different skin on, and they call it a day. And it's super cheap to do because all the technology is already there. Found footage, the shitty ones have all been that exact same way. They put a different, not even unique, like a different branch of a genre over this skeleton and call it a day and say it's the exact same thing, and it fails miraculously. But a lot of people have seen some of those shitty ones, and it totally colors their opinion on all of them, which there's some really great ones out there.
There are. And, I mentioned Oren Peli and, blaming Oren Peli. Oren Peli attempted to do his own thing after Paranormal Activity. And on the Kulturecast, you and I just talked about No One Will Save You. Area 51, not a good movie.
Nope.
And again, but it's the guy who directed Paranormal Activity, the movie that ushered in kind of the, I would say, second wave found footage, third wave of found footage movies.
Certainly.
Even his movie wasn't successful. So it's like, it is so, like, found footage is ultimately lightning in the bottle too. Like, I know why Paranormal Activity was successful, but you can't just do the same gimmick over and over again. And that's what the problem with Paranormal Activity and all those movies similar to it are. You cannot do the same thing and expect people to be as engaged as they were the first time. Paranormal Activity 1 is a better movie than anything that came after it because it was just its own thing. It was novel. It was unique. And then they did it a million more times and it stopped being novel and unique and it just started being diminishing returns. But one might say, because it's Paranormal Activity 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think, the people that it's being made for are the people that were already there. And they're not really trying to get anybody new to be involved, which in and of itself is also kind of a problem.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, let's get into a list. We decided to do a top 7. We're both going to go through these that are, again, we're not saying these are the best necessarily, but like 7 favorites, we'll say. I'm sure you could argue many films are better than some of the ones I'm going to mention, but I happen to have a handful of honorable mentions, so I'm sure we can talk about some of those after that we both appreciate. So, as you are the guest, let's hear what you have in at your number 7.
So, just want to point this out for you, as you just kind of mentioned it. There's no order to this list. It is just 7 movies I think worth checking out. So
Nice.
the value of these are not determined by any number thing. If yours are, cool. I mean, I don't know. I'm
about the same way.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one I want to mention, I think is one worth talking about primarily because I think of the amount of influence it would end up having on the genre. Cannibal Holocaust, which I know is a controversial pick. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, several animals are killed in that movie for real, which similarly to Cockfighter, I don't think people are interested in seeing that anymore. However, if you want to see where the found footage genre came from, Cannibal Holocaust is a very good starting place. Is it a great movie? Is it a movie? Like, I don't know. Like, what it's trying to do is so different from some of the other movies that I'm going to be mentioning that like, I love the framing device. I love that it's a movie about the people that found the footage of the people that were sent to the jungle. So again, it's that found footage. The footage is literally being found. So you have to draw conclusions immediately about the people in the footage. But I love everything about Cannibal Holocaust other than the animal murder. But again, I understand why they did it because they were trying to really be exploitative and shocking. And Ruggiero Deodato got taken to Italian court because they thought that he actually killed the people that he made the movie with. So again, like, I don't think you can overlook Cannibal Holocaust. I don't think it's necessarily the most important thing to check out in 2023, but it is where a lot of this started.
And has some of the most iconic scenes in the genre by far.
And that music.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. It's like seared in my memory from the first time I watched it in 2007. Around the same time I watched Solo or 120 Days of Sodom. So, yeah, which will not be on this list for fucking multitude of reasons.
Damn.
I know, what a shame, right?
Cannibal Holocaust is it's good. I'm not going to say it's not good. I think it's well made. I think Ruggiero Deodato had better films in him that he eventually got out. But for the genre, this is literally probably the most important. Many others will point to something in the 90s and say that it's much more important. But no, this is where it all starts. And without this, You got to have a top of the lineage somewhere, and this is a really great beginning.
Yeah. And we should point out that there are some other movies that are considered found footage, but they're not horror movies. And if we're talking found footage seems to be a horror movie exclusive thing. It's not. There are other movies that are not horror movies that are found footage, but horror seems to be the raison d'etre of found footage for sure. So, what about you? Lay one on me. I want to hear one of yours.
One of mine seems to finally be getting a little bit of love. I feel like it has gone under the radar since its release.
Pause. How many are we going to have? We need to guess here. How many are we going to have that are crossovers, you think? I'm curious here.
I'm going to say 3.
Okay. But you have a list of how many?
Technically, I have a list of 11, but okay. I'm just gonna do the top 7 that I said these are my 7 favorite.
Okay. But I want to hear
Cannibal Holocaust is not on that list. So
okay, I want to hear your honorable mention as well. I think we'll probably have 3 crossovers, maybe.
Very interesting. So, this first one, quite overlooked at the beginning. I think this one sort of started to take off because of Netflix, if I remember right, which, not the best way to see this. I think this is a very good theater movie. And I want to throw out As Above, So Below.
Oh, my God, my friend. Whew. Not a crossover.
Good.
But
does that mean you hate it? Okay, good.
No, I am actually a huge fan of the Dowdles for a number of reasons that we will get to soon. I am a huge fan of the Dowdles. I am a huge fan of As Above, So Below. I think it's a movie that does deserve a lot more praise than it has gotten. And I think if we're talking about like a movie that has a lot to say, but doesn't necessarily let what it's trying to say get in the way of being an entertaining movie.
Yes.
I think it also works on that level as well.
Yeah. So this one, the primary reason that I go back to this movie is, one, because of the setting. And I think that is what gives this sort of some panache over the rest of the found footage films that you would normally reach for. The individuals that are in this movie that are filming this as a found footage movie, they enter what is literally an open cave that people go urban exploring in. It is an actual place that you can go see, and filmed in the catacombs in a way that is actually pretty terrifying, done in a way that you could envision yourself through this shaky cam footage of a found footage scenario of you being in that situation and being scared out of your mind. And I spent a lot of time, as you mentioned earlier, I grew up in Southern California. I grew up about 5 or 6 miles away from a literal old mining ghost town. And in the hills around there are tons of old silver mines that you can still go into and see the remnants of the way that they do these. And it is terrifying to be 150 feet deep into this mine that you can't see any light. If you turn off your flashlight, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and you hear some scurrying. And it happens because it's the frickin' desert. So you hear a kangaroo rat, or you hear some stupid little bug that something happens. And this movie gets a lot of that done so well that you are just immersed into this one.
I'm so glad you mentioned this movie. This is a movie that, I think it's gotten forgotten. But I mean, again, like the mid 10s were like the dumping ground for found footage movies. Like that's the thing. Like so many of the movies that like I overlooked and had no intention of putting on the list are from 10 to 20. I mean, fucking Paranormal Activity really punched everybody in the face. 2007 is where we're talking here, right? Because 2007's Paranormal Activity, and then what As Above, So Below is 7 years later,
something like that. Yeah,
smack dab in the middle of this huge trend that is now going on of found footage coming back. And so for me, the thing about As Above, So Below is it's their second crack at found footage.
Yep.
So I'll take this opportunity to mention one of mine, and it's a movie that I have been a fan of since the first time I saw it. I'll be this guy for once. I hate doing this shit. I loved the Poughkeepsie tapes long before anybody cared about it. I got to interview the Dowdle brothers and Stacy Shabosky on my show 6, 10, however many fucking years ago it was now.
Wow.
The three of them at the same time, after I had already done an interview with Stacy Shabosky, and I was like, hey, I had reached out to your husband, who is one of the Dowdle brothers, and I never heard anything back from his agent. And she was like, oh, I'll put in the good word. So I got to speak to the three of them on the record long before the Blu-ray came out, long before the movie even got released. So like I said, I never pull that kind of card, but this is one of those movies that I feel like I personally have a lot of like love for, even though it is probably, of all the movies I'm going to mention, the hardest one to suggest because it is the most off-putting for a number of reasons. But I also think it's a movie that if it come out now, people would be going fucking ape shit over. And I'm talking
it would be so unique.
Yeah, not just like hyper ape shit, but like people, the scariest movie of the year. Released
wonderful
by
voice work there.
A24 presents. Like that is the level of what I personally feel the Poughkeepsie Tapes offers is a unsettling look at something that so many people are like, oh, I love the Dahmer show. Not if you actually had to see it from the perspective of the person, So Poughkeepsie Tapes for me is a big one. And if you don't know what the Poughkeepsie Tapes is, it's a found footage mockumentary kind of that uses talking heads style interviews along with found footage to talk about a serial killer that existed in Poughkeepsie, New York, specifically, supposedly, not real, obviously, but the movie is presenting itself as real. And I will say very little else because it's one of those movies that deserves to be watched. And, it's only been 6 years since it got released on Blu-ray. Right? It was from 2007 and it didn't get released on Blu-ray until 2017.
Wow.
And it was like a calling card for the Dowdles behind the scenes because people in the industry knew about it and had seen it and would like talk to them about it, but there was no way for anyone to watch it legally. Like the version that I saw when we did the podcast on it in 2015 was the rip that had come off of, was it DirecTV, the VOD like DirecTV rip? Yeah. So it's a movie that I don't know. You've seen it, right?
This is where I'm going to lose a card here. So I've not seen it all the way through. My issue, I've had a couple of the scenes spoiled. It has been played in like the 100 most shocking scenes that you'll see, whatever. And I've had a couple of the scenes and it takes that power away. So I'm trying to give it time to completely forget what I've seen so I can go into it fully blind.
Yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, is it? Yeah, it is a movie that. I would say it would be better if you knew less.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's a movie for me that, like I said, I definitely am a huge proponent of pushing your film limits as a viewer, and the Poughkeepsie Tapes is a very good way to push your limits as a film viewer because it is relentless.
Yep.
It is a relentless movie from start to finish. And similarly to like the best kinds of icky horror movies like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or a Martyrs, it doesn't pull any punches. And I appreciate that. And there are a couple scenes in that movie that even when I watch them now, I'm like, if I could just do this one thing as well as they've done it, I would die a happy person. Because there are some scenes in that movie that are so effective, you forget that these are, first-time filmmakers, essentially.
Yeah, I know I need to watch it. It's probably about that time. It's been some years since I've had it spoiled, so it's around there.
It's a goodie. And their Waco TV show, also fantastic.
I have not seen that one. I need to watch that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the first one I'm kind of worried might be a crossover. And
okay.
I'm really eager to take us back to the year of 2007 and really highlight the best film of the year.
Oh, God.
And the best found footage film of the year. I'll go that far. I won't say the best film of the year. The acting in this is incredible. So we probably should talk about Rec.
Okay. Not a crossover on my list.
Good.
I've actually never even seen it. I've seen Quarantine.
Wow. It is much better than Quarantine.
Jennifer Carpenter is not a great actress. Is it Jennifer? Is it Jennifer? It's the chick from Dexter. No.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Let me see. So Rec, 2007. The actress in this is Manuela Velasco, and she is genuinely amazing. She is somebody that you are able to empathize with immediately. She plays it is Jennifer Carpenter. She plays a news TV reporter that is going to this apartment building. Something happens outside, and they are locked inside, essentially under quarantine in this single location, done in a way that they're going to get multiple locations out of shooting in a single location. So you have multiple floors, you're going to different people's apartments. This has some of the most unique shots in found footage that you will ever find. They get jump scares out of you that are actually terrifying because it is using the found footage format to its nearly its peak, I would say. Doing the entire like handheld shaky cam, this is maybe the peak of it for me, because it is shot in a way where you are in a dark apartment, and because your vision is obscured by somebody turning, there's always something around every corner that can scare the hell out of you. And it is so well acted that everything feels earnest in this movie. Done really well. Won't get into too many spoilers, but if you've never seen it, this is certainly one to seek out.
I have not seen it, and I almost feel ashamed I haven't seen it, that I've only seen the American remake, which I think probably increased the interest in the original movie more than... Yeah. I don't think anybody's talking about the American remake of this movie.
Or the sequel to it. I forgot there was a Quarantine 2.
Oh, Terminal. Oh my God. Wait, I forgot that Quarantine was directed by one of the Dowdle brothers.
I don't think I knew that.
Quarantine is directed by John Eric Dowdle. So we just named 3 Dowdle brother movies in a row.
Thankfully, I'm naming Rec, so this one's just a side quest.
Yeah, I guess Quarantine is what they made after the Poughkeepsie tapes, before they made Devil.
Interesting.
Yeah,
they've done so much.
Quarantine I have not seen. Quarantine I have seen. Rec I have not seen, and I need to watch it because I enjoyed Quarantine for what it is, but it's very clearly not their idea. Right. Which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, but the early or the mid 2000s was also like, if you're talking about this now, it's a weird kind of intersection of found footage and also like the remake thing that was going on in the late 2000s, early 10s, like Quarantine, Let the Right One In, like so many, just like all these movies that are just like, okay, well, I'll just watch the original one.
The Crazies, The Hills Have Eyes, The Evil Dead.
Yep. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street.
We don't mention that one.
You know what? That's the saddest one for me. It really is. That's the one that bums me out the most for like so many reasons. Primarily because Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite horror movie. So it doesn't help. But
for Rec, I did want to say there are 3 sequels. They are all worth watching, though none of them live up to the passion of that first one.
But they're still worth watching.
Absolutely. And I think like half of one of the movies loses the found footage conceit. And if I remember right, the 4th one doesn't have it at all. So it's like 2.5 movies are found footage and 1.5 are not.
That's awesome though, because I've always wondered, like, could you do that? Could you do like 2 found footage movies and then the 3rd movie is just like a movie?
Yeah.
So I'm glad to know that somebody has already kind of approached that question.
I think that's the case. It's been a while since I've seen the sequels.
I mean, at some point, found footage, like like Paranormal Activity, we keep talking about it, but all of those movies are found footage. Every single one of them. They never do anything else. Like they use different styles of found footage camera work, but like it's found footage. It's found footage. It's found footage. It's never not, and it will never not be, because that's part of the appeal of that franchise is the found footage aspect of it, even if it is insanely hampering.
I do like watching them try to jump through hoops to explain how it's still found footage.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're having to work harder than, I don't know, if you're having to work harder to explain to me why it's found footage than just letting it breathe, you've already failed. So,
yeah.
Right? I mean, the conceit has to be rock solid for me to be on board immediately. And a lot of filmmakers are really, really struggle with that aspect of it. So,
yep. Completely agree. All right, I think we're on to your number 5.
So I'm kind of surprised that you haven't mentioned this yet, and this might be our first crossover. The movie that I think, if we're talking about the best big budget found footage movie, period. As much as I have problems with it, which I mean, I have so many problems for it, for every kind of reason. Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams, Cloverfield. Which is like his unpopular opinion, which is an unpopular pick, is it not?
Nowadays it is, especially we just talked about TJ Miller on your episode for the Kulturecast too.
Yeah, and boy, he's at the I mean, like I said, I have problems with it. One of them being TJ Miller's involvement, but this is 2008 TJ Miller, so this is like this is TJ Miller before he was even TJ Miller. This is the first thing that he was in. I think Cloverfield is immensely successful as a movie. I think it's immensely successful as also a piece of like war adjacent cinema in terms of like the expectations and like maybe not war adjacent cinema, but definitely like a weird release valve for 9/11 and the kind of weird post 9/11 feelings that were around, I mean, still are obviously, but the post 9/11 feelings, especially in New York, it captures that in a weird way. And it captures something that I also really appreciate, which is it really feels like, at least in the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up until one of the characters dies. And I guess it's been so long that you can, the Mike Vogel character on the bridge. When the bridge is collapsed, that's when the movie stops really working for me, because all of a sudden it starts wanting to do different things. But the first like 30 minutes of that movie are so well done and so like well thought out, and it puts you directly in a position that you hope to never be in, which is being in a city during an attack. This just happens to be monsters. You know what I mean? Like that, and that's the aspect of it that I had a hard time wrapping my head around when I was 17. I remember the movie really made me angry when I was 17 for a number of reasons. I think the ending of the movie is a complete fucking joke, frankly. And like, and it really is just like, oh my God, you really are embracing found footage all the way. But yeah, I am a defender of Cloverfield, even though I have immense amounts of problems with it. I cannot overlook how important it is as a movie to the found footage genre as a whole.
Yeah. I do think this is probably either, if I was ranking in importance, probably the third or fourth most important found footage film, easily, especially bringing it to mainstream audiences in a time that they could show that it wasn't just a film from the 90s that I'm sure one of us will talk about later. But this is something that, again, has a lot of problems. This is nowhere near my list. I actually really love this movie. I think it's great, but it is not even like top 10 or 12 for me. It's
really? It doesn't show up anywhere. Like, I mean, again, like I like I've said, I am a defender of a movie that I understand is immensely flawed, but you put it pretty succinctly. This movie, in a lot of ways, is a turning point in American cinema for a lot of reasons. One of them being it allowed J.J. Abrams to really flex his muscles outside of the TV sphere, because pre-Cloverfield, he was the TV guy. And Cloverfield, and you know what? I feel like, and again, some people aren't going to have a frame of reference for this. Some people are going to turn this shit off for 5 minutes. The ARG behind the movie, like everything about that movie. Were you in the theater seeing Transformers and seeing the trailer for Cloverfield organically like I did? Were you one of those people?
I saw it in the drive-in, so close enough.
But you had not seen or heard anything about it.
Correct.
Was that not unlike anything else?
Oh yeah, it was all hype, and that's why, again, this is why I think it's such a parallel to that film in the 90s, that it has this immense marketing that they honestly did pretty well with the other Cloverfield movies that aren't found footage, but they
bro, no, Cloverfield Paradox is not worth even like, oh my
But the marketing for it, the way they
Yeah.
hyped it up as a, hey, this is dropping tonight after this massive worldwide event. You can watch it now. And everybody went and turned it on for a couple minutes and then turned it off. But it was done in such a unique way that other filmmakers and production companies, they don't utilize stuff like that.
As much as we're going to, drag Cloverfield Paradox for a moment, I actually think that movie's not as bad as everybody gave it credit for being bad. I think it's just a very confused movie that's trying to do 8 million things at once. It clearly didn't affect Julius Ona's career a whole lot because, he's directing Captain America Brave New World now for Marvel. So it must not have been the career killer, and Gugu Mbatha Raw and like half of everybody in that movie is still perfectly fine. I think for me, 10 Cloverfield Lane is the more disappointing of the three because that movie shits the bed hard at the end. We just talked about No One Will Save You, and I'm actually pissed at myself for not comparing the two. Cloverfield Paradox and No One Will Save You have a almost identical third act in terms of how much of a turd it is and how much it undoes all of the goodwill that the movie has been building. 10 Cloverfield Lane's worse because that movie, I love 10 Cloverfield Lane's first 2/3. But then everything else is then the aliens showed up. But
I love
what's weird is
Cloverfield Lane's first 90%. I want to say that.
Yeah, it's fair. I remember getting into big arguments with people after that movie came out about the third act of that movie and me being like, it was really bad. We did need to see the aliens. And I was willing to die on that hill. And everybody else was like, no, we had to. I was like, did you see what they looked like? They didn't look good. They looked terrible. And, oh, by the way, the movie falls apart the moment the aliens can just die. And again, it also falls apart because there are aliens. It would have been more interesting if there had been nothing.
Well, and I still say they were making this movie and it was going really well, but they didn't know how to end it. And J.J. Abrams just happened to be walking by a daily or something and went, what if they came out to aliens? And they just tacked that on at the end. I don't think that was ever meant to be a part of it from the beginning.
Well, that's the other question, right, with all of this is what was a Cloverfield movie? What was something else that got turned into It's like Hellraiser. How many of those Hellraiser movies were Hellraiser before we just tacked the pinhead on there and said, well, it's a Hellraiser movie now.
Yeah, if it was just called Paradox, that probably would have gone from 1.5 stars to 3 stars in most people's minds.
Imagine if you hadn't known it was a Cloverfield movie until imagine if they had done what they did in Split. Because for me, Split is a great example. Not to ruin the twist, because I don't want to ruin the twist in that movie. The twist in that movie is so fucking wild and so insane that it connects these two seemingly disparate things that you're like, oh my God, I'm glad you didn't tell me this going into this because it makes me appreciate it that much more. Yeah. You put Cloverfield in the title, there's an expectation that is going to need to be met. And Cloverfield Paradox, the end of that movie, I still cannot believe they did I still don't even understand what that movie is going for at the end. But it all starts with 2008's Cloverfield, which again, I think is a movie Drew Goddard turned in a great script. I am a fan of Matt Reeves. I think Matt Reeves does good work. I might be a little biased, given proximity to the people that I know that know him and how effusively they speak of him. But I know, as do you, the people involved in making Cloverfield had their hearts in the right place.
This one is, it's a good movie. It's just, again, not near the top of my list.
Which I completely understand because there is a derivation of my list where it wasn't on there at all. And I was like, I left it on and left something else off. So what was that thing I left off, Ryan? You're probably going to mention it.
I probably will at some point. But what's funny is my number 5 and your number 5 are sort of similar. Yours is doing for monster movies and allowing found footage to come in to interrupt what was this long-established genre. And I'm going to bring one that is from shortly after that interrupts another genre that was taking over for people. And I want to mention 2012's Chronicle.
I was wondering if the Trankster was going to show up. God, the less said about Josh Trank, the better. Am I right or am I right?
Yeah, we definitely don't need to discuss the parallels with this and Fantastic Four.
Fan
Dane
Four
DeHaan,
Stick. Fan Four Stick.
Van Forstick. This movie is so much better than it has any right being. You are seeing or is it three kids that are basically they're discovering that they have gained superpowers through this odd event, and I am a sucker for watching a story about humans discovering that they're the baddies, basically. So, like The Mist from 2007 or whatever it is such a great movie because it's civilization crumbling because of humans. Right. And Chronicle is high school students thinking that they're amazing, crumbling because they're terrible, terrible people. And it just shows that at the heart, a lot of people are just terrible people. And it's acted in this really earnest way when it didn't need to be. It's fun. It's an intriguing story. It takes the idea of a superhero story that was already a couple years into the MCU and starting to really proliferate all of our cinemas and just said, you know what? There's still interesting stories to tell that are not just fucking Iron Man. And it's really fun and really slept on in 2023.
Well, again, there's a reason for that, unfortunately. given the people involved, I mean, again, as much as I like John Landis, it's kind of hard. I mean, it's hard to not bring up Max Landis because Max Landis is look, my opinions on Max Landis are probably similar to what Max Landis's opinions are on most people. He is who he is, and there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, some people don't like who he is, which is what it is. I mean, like anything else, you're going to rub people the wrong way, especially if you have a lot of opinions or if you're very opinionated or if you're unwilling to change your opinion. And Max Landis, I mean, look, if my dad was John Landis, I'd probably feel the same way about like my opinion matters. Not only does my opinion matter, I feel like I can convey my opinion to you in a way that other people can't. And Max Landis has a track record of making some pretty interesting choices as a screenwriter. And I haven't seen Chronicle, not because of Max Landis and not because of Josh Trank. I just missed it. I don't know why. Just kind of under the radar.
Most people have.
Josh Trank, though, did himself no favors, unfortunately.
Not at all.
I feel bad for him in a way, but at the same time, you know, I don't know. That whole thing with Star Wars and Boba Fett and all of that. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I should check out Chronicle. It's like I said, not avoiding it for any particular reason, just because you can't watch everything, you know?
Right. It's worth it. I promise.
So for me, I will mention another movie that I think, again, it kind of toes the line. It's, you know, I will say it's a horror movie and it has found footage parts. The way it's filmed, I think, isn't found footage. It's cinema verite, but there's the parts of the movie that are the most off-putting are the found footage parts. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Is it found footage?
I wouldn't call it, but yeah.
But you get what I'm getting at, though, because
Absolutely.
the way it's filmed, there's a scene. One of the more effective scenes in the movie is found footage, and yeah, I understand that this might be a little bit of a cheat, but I don't think it's a cheat because the parts of the movie that are really putting people off to it are the found footage parts.
Right. Yeah, this one is a masterpiece, and if somebody has not seen the Arrow Video 4K that they released of this, that it makes it even more troubling. It feels just seedy to watch it.
I'm a fan of it, but it's a movie that I used to hate. I had a visceral reaction the first time I watched it because it's about as nihilistic a movie as you can get. And Michael Rooker just burns the screen down, baby. If that's your first fucking role in a movie, my God, do you need to do anything else? Like,
other than therapy?
Yeah. And you know, what's crazy is, and I think we did an episode on Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, either end of last year or earlier this year on the Kulturecast. I think I said it there and I'll say it here. Isn't it crazy Michael Rooker is in Marvel too?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it? That's Yondu, everybody. Like, that's still hard for me to wrap my head around because the first time I saw Henry was so long before Guardians. There's no way you could have convinced me he would be in a Marvel movie. But so James Gunn goes, so does everybody who works for him, or with him. So Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, though, definitely not for the faint of heart. Very similar to the Poughkeepsie tapes, but more narratively driven. And again, it's not all found footage, but the part of the movie with the found footage is so off-putting, and I've gotta assume it's the part of the movie where most people are turning it off.
Oh yeah.
That have like wandered into it or saw it somewhere that like, yeah. But it's definitely worth a watch. For me, it's one worth checking out, and I go back to it once a year. It definitely feels, similarly to The Exorcist, like they captured something on film that feels a little bit more true to life and real than they may have been intending. But that for me is what works. That's for me is what makes the movie so good, is that it does feel like they kind of captured reality a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie is done authentically to a degree that most movies could only dream of.
Right. Short of actually murdering people. And I'm sure people who saw that movie when it came out were like, is this guy actually killing people? Because he seems, again, like Michael Rooker at that age in that movie looks just, there have been fewer people perfectly cast for a kind of role like that, for sure.
Bingo. I'm going to totally switch our tone around because it feels like we need it. Coming from that, I'm going to take us all the way to 2014 and talk about probably the funniest found footage movie ever. What We Do in the Shadows.
Never seen it.
Wow.
I've never seen the movie, but I love the show.
I've heard divisive things. Half people think that the show is like leagues better. I still think the movie is quite a bit better. But Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement, they direct this together. They also wrote it together. And this movie has some of the most quotable lines in modern film history. It is so damn funny. You get the individuals that came together to create some of the best TV show. Some of the best TV shows over the last. When did Flight of the Conchords come out? It was a few years before this, so they weren't like massively popular.
Flight of the Conchords came out when I was in high school, so it would have been like 2006 or 7. Because I remember being in the computer lab as a senior and watching Hippopotamus on the computer and thinking it was like the funniest thing.
That checks out.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, Flight of the Conchords was 07 to 09.
Okay, so that led into them developing a little more behind the scenes, and then a couple years later, teaming up with Taika and creating this in a way that melds the horror genre and all of the tropes that are with it with classical vampire stories that have not been told this way in a long, long time. And it is beautiful to look at. It is wonderfully acted. It is funny in every single scene. It is just an insane story that obviously inspired an entire TV show that has been able to go on for like 4 or 5 seasons now. It's a masterpiece. Yeah, it's incredible.
I can't speak to the movie, but I can speak to the show. The show is look, I have to assume the movie set a pretty good base for the show to rest upon. And from what you just said and other people that I've spoken to and listened to talking about it, yeah, I love the show. I mean, look, the movie doesn't have Matt Berry in it, so it automatically is one peg lower just because it doesn't have Matt Berry. I appreciate that. But Jermaine Clement, Taika Waititi, I'm sure make up for it. But for me, Laszlo Cravensworth is one of the great TV characters that has ever been created. And I mean, look, Matt Berry is such a weird dude and such an idiosyncratic human being that there's only one person that could play that role. And they found him. And the show is quotable, so I've got to assume the movie's the same way.
Extremely, extremely.
Yeah, Matt Berry should just be in everything, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Same with Jermaine Clement. Dude is hilarious.
And Kayvon Novak as well, someone who I had seen in literally nothing else.
Yeah.
He's oh my God, he's hilarious. Everything about that show is fantastic. Harvey Guillen, I mean, we could go on. That's a found footage TV show, I guess, more of a mockumentary. Right?
Yeah.
It's a mockumentary. Yeah. Good pick. Yeah, great pick. Didn't make my list though. No crossovers yet. What's going on?
We only have 3 left. I don't think we're gonna have 3.
I know. So my next one is, and I will leave the one that I want to really highlight last. So not my favorite, but one I think less people have seen.
Okay.
This one for me, I covered it a long time ago on the show. Got to speak to the director, Patrick Bryce. Again, those things, just being upfront and honest, and it doesn't color my judgment on it. at all, frankly, because I think you know what I'm going to mention now that I mentioned Patrick Bryce. 2014's Creep is genuinely one of the scarier movies I think I've ever seen, because it speaks to a thing that people like, the Craigslisting of the like M for Emming and stuff like
Casual
that. Like,
encounters.
yeah, the casual encounterness of the internet in the mid 2000s to early 10s. Like, look, Craigslist is essentially a shell of its former self now, because they've gotten rid of so many of the things that allowed people to meet for whatever reason. I will add, for whatever M for M reason. I always think of Horrible Bosses when I think of M for M. We are men seeking a man. $750 to murder 3 people. You didn't think that was too cheap? So it does speak to a time and a place that I think, you know, now with the advent of things like Tinder and Grindr and other like sexual meetup apps, this story kind of maybe is a little bit hollower than it used to be, in terms of like, yeah, you would never just go meet some fucking dude at his fucking house. Right. But man, if that movie like doesn't hit the way that it used to, like, I'd be surprised. But like, anybody who watches it now, I feel like is going to feel the same way I did when I first watched it, which was, how did you make Mark Duplass seem like such a fucking monster? Because like, again, at the time when that movie came out, the only thing I had seen him in was the League. Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's the guy from the League. Oh, and he's a complete fucking psychopath in this movie. I don't know. I love that movie. The less you know about that movie, the better. It's a wild movie. Have you seen it?
Creep 2014 is on my list. This is our first match, and I'm gonna move my order around. This might be my favorite found footage movie of all time.
Creep?
Yeah.
Wow.
I love this fucking movie. And the main reason primarily is because of Mark Duplass. He is unhinged in this in so many ways that you are just not ready for. One of the better endings on any of these movies for sure. Has some of the most iconic imagery in found footage as well, like the stupid fucking mask and the eating of
mask. The mask is really where it all the energy comes from, that fucking mask. No.
The eating of pancakes so nonchalantly, the walking by the little creek that they're next to. There's so many things that happen in this movie that genuinely got under my skin, and because it's Mark Duplass and it is delivered by somebody that you've seen be goofy as hell, that you've seen in some of the better mumblecore movies out there, that you've seen now be unhinged in other movies as well. Even this year, he was on Celebrity fucking Jeopardy. Like, to have Mark Duplass be this type of a character makes this movie nearly a 10 out of 10 for me.
I think Mark Duplass, as good as he is in front of the camera, has a mind for the business in a way 100%. That, like, you know, I love people that are a double or triple threat, and Mark Duplass, and obviously his brother. I mean, the Duplass brothers, I think in general, they are, they're 2 smart cookies. And, you know, I think for me, people like them in the industry are a godsend to help us get out of the ruts that we constantly find ourselves in with genres, because Creep, for me, when it came out, ushered in like some weirdo other movies that came afterwards were, again, these like really boiled, pared down found footage movies. Like, it's the most found footage movie on this list, I think, between the two of ours, because it's just a dude, it's 2 dudes and a camera.
Yep. And done in a way where it's not in one location. They, you know, our main protagonist, I guess if you kind of want to call him that, he shows up at home after he's done working for the guy, turns on his camera again to say something weird is happening, let's talk about it. And so you get that awkward, we are literally just cataloging events, and that's why it's actually found footage.
Right. And the video journaling aspect of it is so, I don't know, that made it feel so unique. It makes me want to rewatch it. I haven't probably seen it since it came out. And that's the impact that it made on me, similarly to yourself, that it's still something that I'm thinking about almost 10 years later. And again, I got to speak to Patrick Bryce a decade ago. That matters nothing to my enjoyment of the movie. It's just again, like, it's just weird to me because the movie's been out for almost a decade now.
Yeah. How do you feel about the sequel?
I never saw the sequel.
It's worth it. It's not as good. It's not a 10 out of 10, but it's much better than you would think. And I sincerely hope that after what's been 8 years since the sequel came out, they're supposedly trying to make a third one, and it was going to be a believed trilogy at one point. I hope they can get there because it deserves a final nail in that coffin.
Yeah, I mean, look, you got 2 of the 3 movies. Don't pull a Guillermo del Toro and leave us hanging.
Right. Please.
David Harbour is not my Hellboy. It still freaks me out to think about that there's no third Hellboy movie because it's just part of Guillermo del Toro's ever-growing list of unrealized projects on Wikipedia.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
So I will say that was my number 3. So we can jump to your number 2, since that was literally going to be my number 1.
My number 2 would be another thing that, again, it is found footage, but it's a little different. It's not just, a guy with a camera. Did cover this on my show a while ago. Definitely something I just watched last week. I watch it at least once a year during October, probably 2 or 3 other times outside of that. It's something that made a lot of waves. It was hard to find for the longest time. Now I believe it's on Shudder. It is from the 90s. It is not the Blair Witch Project. It is Ghostwatch.
Ah, yeah. 101 Films put that out.
I fucking love Ghostwatch. If you've never seen Ghostwatch, I'm not going to say anymore other than it is a recreation. It is a mockumentary style recreation of a ghost investigation on the British Broadcasting Channel in the mid-90s. But it took place in the 90s. But they're trying to make it seem like it's real, but it's not. The funny thing about it is, because of when it was played, because the people watching it didn't catch the beginning, it Orson Welles'd itself and people thought it was real. Boy, if I had been watching it in 92 on Halloween and not knowing it wasn't real, I would have been fucking mortified. It not only has Michael Parkinson and Sarah Green and Mike Smith and Craig Charles, all the people who were on the show that this show is taking place on. So they're doing all of the set dressing correctly. And it all just comes together in a way that is hard to describe, but it is so amazing when you watch it. I don't know how, it's just one of those things that works on every level. And by the end of it, you're just like, man, somebody made this. And like, it did exactly what it was supposed to. Perfectly, frankly. Like, I'm not saying it's good that someone died while watching it, but it definitely helped the mystique. It helped the mystique of this thing,
right?
Kind of become. I mean, it was never replayed on the BBC. Like, it got played one time, and that was it. The BBC never wanted to show it again because of what happened. So, yeah, it's. I don't know if you've never seen it. It's definitely worth checking out. Is this something that you have an opinion on? Did this make your list in any form or fashion?
It did not make my list, but I really do like Ghostwatch. It lives in that same pantheon as The Last Broadcast to me. It's sort of similar. Like, The Last Broadcast has always been called the lesser Blair Witch because it came right before it. But the way these two feel, I don't know. There's something about that period of the 90s. They feel very similar to me.
Yeah.
Ghostwatch is a lot of fun. A lot of the British anachronisms that they use through this makes it feel a little more authentic, and it's just a good watch. It's a solid, good time.
I mean, yeah, if you have the person who hosts a show hosting your show, like, it's, I don't know, like, it works. It works better. It's so much fun. I think everything about it is fun, and it goes places you wouldn't expect, and it is scary, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be. It really holds back. It practices so much restraint, and for me, I'm a fan of practicing restraint with found footage because it allows the idea to breathe. And hey, it's based off the Enfield Poltergeist, which is a fantastic case that would then get chronicled and adapted in The Conjuring 2, which Conjuring 1 and 2, as far as I'm concerned, are pretty much modern horror classics. So, no, Ghostwatch is up there. It's not what my number 1 is, but it's definitely one of those movies that, like, I mention every spooky season to people I know who haven't seen it. And I'm like, please watch this because I know you will enjoy it.
Which sadly is most people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And again, like I mentioned, I did do an episode on it on my show where I got to speak to Stephen Volk, who wrote it, and Leslie Manning, who directed it. And that was, again, it's immensely fun to be able to talk to the people who work on these things and get to kind of listen to their stories. But I don't know, I always felt on the Kulturecast that it's my job to shine a light on things that aren't getting highlighted. And Ghost Watch, I mean, it's finally getting the credit that it deserves. It got on Shudder. It got... right before I started doing the podcast, it had a documentary that came out, Ghost Watch Behind the Curtains. And I think they even did like a live seance to mimic the Ghost Watch thing at some point in the last like 5 to 6 years. So Ghost Watch is definitely up there for me. It's a good one. Different, but good.
Well, it's probably time. I'm just going to go there. And at number 2, I should probably talk about the Blair Witch Project.
So to say, like, I've been waiting for you to mention it.
So this is obviously like one of those few seminal films. This is probably the second most impactful in the entire genre for me. This one, we talked about the marketing behind this being just incredible earlier, and I don't think much of anything will be able to hit this again because we don't have that sort of a society anymore. We don't have a word of mouth society. Everything has to be online, and social media will blow it up immediately. This took the country by storm, and that is a lot when you consider that this came out in what is arguably one of the 2 or 3 greatest film years ever.
So and the fact that a book was written about it.
Right. The fact that it still has that legacy, and it's a horror movie that's found footage without an actual villain attached to it. There's nobody that you can market. There's no Blair Witch mask that you can buy for Halloween to keep it in the zeitgeist.
That Todd McFarlane and McFarlane movie maniacs tried.
Exactly. The fact that is still here and still this giant legacy shows how important this movie was at that time. Really good scares, really cheaply made, and done in a way that feels great. But what's funny, if you take even 3 steps back from the movie, nothing happens. There's nothing scary about this movie. It's just the fact that you immerse yourself in that, and it's oddly, that sort of experience makes it that much more terrifying.
I didn't put Blair Witch on my list because I figured one of us was going to have to.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you cannot overstate how important this movie is for a lot of things. It ushered in a lot of stuff. It unfortunately created a lot of crappy stuff also, yeah. but the best things often do. I mean, Star Wars came out, and then look at all the stuff that came out after Star Wars. Marvel, look at all the things that came after Marvel. Like it is what it is when you're this successful, and especially when you're this successful organically, when you're doing something that people are not expecting could even be a thing. Blair Witch still works. Blair Witch is a very boring movie. You put it succinctly, like, it's a boring movie. If you take a step back from what the movie is doing so successfully, it's boring.
Nothing happens.
Which is why, and I want to mention this because you opened this box, so I now am going to take the box and rip it apart. 2016's Blair Witch is without a doubt one of the worst horror movies I have ever seen. And it's not just the direction that I have an issue with. It's not just the story, but it's the lack of understanding of what made the movie you're remaking so good to begin with.
Yeah.
And this is also coming at a time where Christoph Waltz isn't Blofeld. Benedict Cumberbatch isn't Khan. And oh, by the way, this movie called The Woods is Blair Witch. Like, we're still in that weird time of, like, we can't tell people the truth about what we're making because that will somehow, I don't know what people's assumption was, but that movie would have been better if it had just been called The Woods and it had nothing to do with Blair Witch.
Absolutely.
But the fact that it had a Blair Witch, like, that movie is just, it's not even found footage. I don't care if they call it found footage. It's such a contrivance throughout that movie. There's drones, there's GoPros, and it seems like a contrivance. I don't know. If we're talking Blair Witch sequels, Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows, the Berlinger cut is a better movie. It's a movie worth watching. It's just a fan edit, though, so I can't really say go out and watch a fan edit of a movie because a fan edit is not. I'm not saying it's bad, but you know what I mean. It's like that's never been the way it was intended to be seen. So
for a movie that's mostly been buried too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest problem with mentioning Blair Witch is the fact that the sequel does not get any love, because the sequel's
Right.
really good. It just got destroyed in the editing booth, like in a way that's really, unless you've seen the Berlinger cut, it's really hard to see what the movie could have been. Like what the movie could have been is really hard to parse out when you watch the original version of the movie. But the original Blair Witch is a classic, period, the end. And 1999 was a hard year to come out in for movies.
Yeah. Again, marketing like that can never take place again. So that's just one of the biggest things that I wanted to highlight.
But yet Cloverfield. Though.
They did it differently, and it's done in a way that took everybody by storm again. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I am a fan of Blair Witch, but no, it did not make my list because I just, like I said, I figured it would make one of our lists. So,
well, let's see if we even match two. What's your final pick?
My final pick came out in 2013. Again, I mean, the coincidence of the three that I'm talking about having been covered on my show, it's only because I rarely cover things I like on my show. And these are things that I can be like, oh yeah, I like this a lot. And so I covered it. And it's a horror movie. 2013's WNUF Halloween special. Does that make your list at all?
I don't think of it as found footage, even though you could argue it is. I
mean, doesn't the framing device of the movie essentially confirm it's found footage?
In a way, yes.
I have a VHS on my shelf here with WNUF written on it. I found it on eBay. Does that count? I do.
I have a Blu-ray that I found in my shopping cart.
I actually have one of those VHSs that they did.
Nice.
Yeah, I got it off eBay for $20 like a long time ago. But I get what you're getting at. I disagree, though, because the framing device. But I will concede you have a point, and if you're looking for something that is more found footage directly, this might not be the best option. But this is something that, similarly to Ghost Watch, it's not just found footage, which allows it to breathe more and be a more interesting narrative being told, as opposed to just a person with a camera walking around.
Agreed fully.
And the less it's said about it, the less it's said about what it is, the better. Imagine you found at a garage sale a Halloween special from the late 80s. And that's what this is.
And I love that it's led to inspiring some other things. There's a sequel for that one. I've got this box next to me. This is Heebie Jeebie TV, which is basically WNUF, but from the 90s. And that just recently came out.
I've not even heard of this. What the fuck?
Yeah. It's literally just got it, so I've not watched it yet, but it's supposed to be pretty great. There was another one that just came out fairly recently from Dead Vision Productions. I think that was last year. That is essentially like a WNUF anthology type film, and it's really fun. Just the style that they're going for is great. It's nostalgic in a way that shouldn't be nostalgic because it's modern. It is done in a way that shows reverence for a time period, and that's another one that, honestly, the legacy from that is kind of marketing through horror fans in a very almost Blair Witch way, because it's very word of mouth. Like, have you heard or seen WNUF? Because it's great.
Not enough people have seen it. This is one of those things that every time I mention it, like, what is it called? I've never heard of this. And it's a shame. I mean, I get why it hasn't been, because it's literally about as small a budget movie as humanly possible. It's about as micro budget a movie as possible, but it ends up working in spite of that, because that's the point with this. And I also will understand that this will not work for a large group of people, because it is not culturally relevant to certain people. None of the experiences that are shared in WNUF have a level of cultural relativity to a certain group of people. But that's not why the movie wasn't being made for them. The movie was literally being made for the people who will understand what you're going for. You're not going to get anybody else, which is a failing of the movie I can appreciate, but it's also a strength of the movie, because you've committed to it so hard that the only people that are going to be imminently interested are the people who understand the source material. So it's hard. I mean, it's hard, because it's hard to sell someone on something where it's like, remember those specials from the 80s? Oh, right. You're like in your mid 20s. So no, you don't. And it's not like I do either. It's just, I understand what they were going for, and I understand what Chris LaMartina was expecting the audience to have a reference point of. So it's not really scary. It's not very much a horror movie. It's a lot more of a vibe movie, but I enjoy it, and I will never miss an opportunity to sing its praises.
And it's an incredible pick for October because it's a very Halloween.
Yeah, I haven't seen the sequel. I can't speak to the sequel. I want to watch it. The sequel is, you have to buy it directly from Chris LaMartina.
For now. I have a feeling it'll get a bigger release eventually.
I hope so. I haven't taken the plunge yet. I've heard it's good. I have heard that it is good though. So
final pick for mine is not WNUF, so we're only going to end up with one crossover, which is
wow, I'm shocked.
Pretty impressive. Mine is probably not one that most people have heard of. Once again, I'm going to go with a 2018 pick, and I have to shoot out there that the best horror for modern filmmakers, I think, is mostly coming out of South Korea. Okay. And I'm going to go with Gonjiam Haunted Asylum.
Okay.
Gonjiam Haunted Asylum is a movie about a web series where people are live streaming, which is sort of turning into this genre unto itself. There's a handful that have been made in the last few years that not all of them are bad. Some of them are bad, but not all of them are bad. This one has some of the best scares on my list, though. It is made in a way that is, it's taking that Asian kind of folk horror, like what is slightly under the surface in this culture, and making it a part of it, but done in such a subversive way that you're just not ready for some of the scares that they put out there. Pretty well acted, some not great CGI, but I think that overall, if you're going to try out something from a different country that is not just a Western film, this is a really great one to grab onto for found footage, and it's done really well for when it came out.
I actually covered this last year at the suggestion of a friend of mine, Josh Bragg of The Haunting Season. He and I covered it about a year ago, not to the day, but October of last year. I enjoyed it immensely. What didn't make my list primarily because I haven't had enough experience with it in the long term. I've seen it once. Yeah. But I enjoyed it. I was actually hoping you were going to say One Cut of the Dead.
It's a great one too.
Which is another good one. What is that one? Is that one Korean or is that one?
I think
that
it's
one's
Japanese.
Yeah. That one is fantastic for different reasons. Does something a little different. Gongjam, I'm actually having a hard time remembering it only because October of every year feels just like a bombardment of things. You know, I feel like I watch more movies in October outside of the podcast movies than I do any other time of the year, because it's just like, I want to be watching horror movies kind of. I mean, again, I watch horror movies throughout the year just like you do, but like something about October, I'd rather watch Halloween movies than horror movies in October.
Same.
But Halloween movies are hard to come by too, right? Like
good ones, at least.
Good ones, other than like Practical Magic and Hocus Pocus. And I'm not kidding. I was being serious. If anyone thinks I'm being a dismissive man, I'm not. I enjoy both of those movies immensely. So
I just referenced Practical Magic on my show literally like last week. So completely get it.
but there was this like weird thing of like, oh, you only like Hocus Pocus because your wife makes you watch it. It's like, no, it's a good movie. And so is Practical Magic. And I'm also a huge fan of Griffin Dunn. So it's going to be hard for me to not sing the praises of Mr. After Hours himself.
The Hocus Pocus sequel, though, not very good, in my opinion.
There was a sequel? The sequel misunderstood what made the original so good. And,
100%.
Yeah. No amount of Hannah Waddingham from Ted Lasso is going to be able to save your movie. Which True. I saw Hocus Pocus 2 before I saw Ted Lasso, so I didn't have any frame of reference for who she was as an actress. And then I rewatched it and I was like, oh, that's weird.
Same.
Yeah. It's Gongjam Haunted Asylum, huh? That's a good pick. I wouldn't have even thought of it. That didn't even cross my mind. That's a good one.
I think it's definitely underseen and one that deserves a lot more attention. And again, a lot of people just don't seek out South Korean films, but I think they are doing the best in the horror genre right now. Like maybe by far.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they're pushing the envelope and they're doing things that are less expected than VHS 1994 or
This is
VHS
true.
85 or however many VHS movies there are. And I remember when it was just the first one. God, that it's a franchise now is insane to me.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
2012 was the first VHS movie. Good Lord in heaven.
They're still making them.
I know. There's one. The one came out this year, right?
Just a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, on Shudder. So what are some of your honorable mentions, and then I'll give you some things that are movies that I would say are avoid these found footage movies. Not because I don't think they're good, but I think they're just a bad example of the genre.
Interesting. So I had 4. One of them was Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay.
One that a lot of people scoff at because they don't like the film, but I actually really like it for how subversive it is. The Last Exorcism. It's not like a really well acted movie other than our main character, but I love the idea of a priest telling you up front, this is all a lie and this is how I fake it. And then going through this whole, like, rediscovering the fact that, holy shit, this one's actually real. Unfortunately, the last 45 seconds of the movie is god-awful, and it ruins everything that comes before it. But the acting for our main character is just amazing.
I have never seen it, but I have heard good things.
It is pretty
until
good.
The ending.
Yeah.
I have heard about the ending. So...
The other one I want to compare to Gonjion that I just brought up is Deadstream, which I just showed this in my show last night. This is a media book from Germany for the film that just came out. I believe it was last year or the year before. And it's the same thing. It's a guy doing a live stream that normally he fakes stuff. And he goes into this house and suddenly this is not fake at all. And it's done in a way where there's an unlikable lead. You're kind of supposed to hate him, which usually makes it a pretty rough movie to fall in love with, and this one pulls it off immaculately. Really well made. Love that movie. Last one is probably one that any other day of the week I would have put this on my list, and I'm shocked that it's not in my top 7. It just didn't feel right at the moment. Hell House LLC.
Oh man, yeah. Fuck man, how did that not make my list? My god, yeah.
This movie is a damn near masterpiece. It is.
Yeah, that first one is such
perfect.
a fucking that is something I covered Hell House LLC on my show and had the opportunity to speak to Stephen Cognetti, and I remember heaping praise on him then, and I will heap praise on the movie now. That movie is like that first movie is so good. It's so good. It pisses me off that I didn't put it on my own list, frankly.
Yeah,
and it's a Halloween movie too.
It is. Yeah, centered around haunts, which is another big popular thing right now. So super good movie, really good creepy scenes, some of the better scares in the genre, and yeah, fun movie.
What did you think of the sequels?
I've not seen the third one. The second one was very ho-hum. It just not great.
I think the third one is better than the second. I think, obviously the first movie was so good and the first movie is kind of just its own thing. But I know Stephen Cognetti said in an interview, like, this is not its own thing. It's meant to be a burst in a 3-part thing.
Right.
I like the second and third well enough. I don't think they spoil how good the first movie is. But man, we just stop what we're doing. We'll just pause this. You and I can watch it, and then we'll just talk about it. Because I haven't watched it in so long. No, God damn it. I'm bummed at myself for not bringing that one up. Because that's another one of those ones where it's like, I can't help but wonder, like, why more people haven't seen it.
Maybe we'll have to rewatch it and record again in like 60 days.
Yeah, man, what a bummer. I can't believe I missed that one. Man. Yeah, like, I don't know, like that was what, 2014, 2015?
Somewhere around there, which a lot of my picks are right around that time.
Yeah, that was like the first year I had started doing podcasting. So yeah. Man, that's a good one. I'm surprised. Things that I'm surprised you didn't mention, and I feel like instead of doing the things to avoid, I would say more things that I would add to this the bigger conversation. The Sacrament.
Mm.
It's okay. I think I enjoyed it because it's different. It's
Yeah.
not just, I mean, like, I'm not saying it's amazing, but I'm also not saying you should avoid it like the plague.
Right.
I'm a fan of the Sacrament in terms of it doing something different. I think the Gallows is a lot better than it has any right to be.
It is, yeah.
Right? Okay. Like, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Don't watch the sequel, but yeah, the first one is.
I didn't even realize there was a sequel.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, right. It's probably for the best.
It's a horror movie that made money, so of course there's a sequel.
Right. I'm a huge fan of Apollo 18.
Yeah, better than I expected.
What's his name? Lloyd Owen is now one of the leads in the Lord of the Rings TV show, which is super weird to like watch that and be like, oh my God, that's that guy who I interviewed like a decade ago about a movie that was already out for like 7 years at the time. I like Apollo 18 a lot. I think it's unique in the sense of what it is. Gonzalo Lopez Gallego has not done anything else as good as that, unfortunately. You also mentioned movies with unlikable protagonists. I think Grave Encounters stands out in terms of like, as a movie about like someone who you definitely don't like being put in a situation that they kind of deserve. I mean, there's so many. There are so many good ones, but there are more just mediocre ones than anything else.
Yeah, and it seems like the classic Dante's Peak type of situation where a movie was coming out, so people hustled to put out another movie that was inferior to that one. A lot of that has happened with found footage. So there are some of these movies that have come out around the same time as something else, and because of that, the bad movie has colored the interpretation for a lot of people for some of these better movies, and so they dismiss anything in the genre. It's worth much more than that.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like the level, the cheapness, the cost effectiveness of making these movies does, I guess, put some people off because again, it's like, oh, look at how cheap this movie looks. Oh, It's like, okay, fine. Like if that's where you're coming at this from, you're not going to have a good time. So, that's the other thing. Like you have to really be willing to work with the movie to get where the movie wants to take you. And I understand that that's hard with found footage because sometimes the movie does everything in its power to not make it easy to follow why they're doing. And like, why don't you just put the camera down and run? Just put the camera down and run. Just put the camera down and run. And like, if the movie can't explain why they haven't done that, you're going to have a hard time with the movie.
Yeah. And like I said at the beginning, I think a lot of these more modern films, they're baking in an answer to that, which does help.
Right. 100%. Not everything is Barry Levinson's The Bay, which is like, I can't even believe he made that movie. I don't know what universe that's a weird one for me. The Bay is like, I don't like, it's such a good idea with the little, what the fuck are those things called? The little things underneath your tongue. And whatever. Sometimes like you said, sometimes what happens in the industry and what happens in the genre dictates the way people react. And The Bay is a reaction to Cloverfield. Like, let's get a prestige director to do a found footage movie. Oh, it's not good.
Exactly. For every Dante's Peak, there's going to be a volcano. And for a lot of these, the volcano somehow it loomed larger, even though it's the vastly inferior film. So if you are dismissing some of these, I mean, even not just the 14 that we listed or the 18 that we ended up talking about, there's a lot out there that, even though they didn't make this list, they're still worth the time. I mean, people worked really hard on a lot of these.
Yeah. And again, some of these were done at such a low budget that when they make as much money as they do, everybody just goes, whoa.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing about found footage is it allows you to make a movie for cheap that has the opportunity to be immensely financially successful.
Which is why Paranormal Activity is a thing, and we haven't even talked about it much.
Right. Other than like the first one's fine. One other movie I would mention, and it's from a director who's more known as a actor, less a director, and we haven't mentioned any of these kinds, so I feel like it's worth mentioning Willow Creek, which is a Bigfoot found footage movie. And it's also a movie about Bigfoot taking forest brides, which is only Bobcat, really. Only Bobcat could go. I mean, that's the subtext of the movie, best I can tell, is Bigfoot taking female hikers and fucking them in the woods, which I think is what Bobcat is going for in that movie.
And many Bigfoot movies.
Yeah, but Willow Creek is fun. I mean, The Legend of Boggy Creek is a more mockumentary than found footage. But again, mockumentary and found footage are kind of same heads of different heads of a same coin, as far as I'm concerned. So, a lot of good ones, a lot of bad ones. More to come, I'm sure.
This has been a lot of fun, Chris. Thanks for taking the time to do it.
No, thank you for having me.
Love conversations like this. Everybody needs to subscribe to the 17 podcast. I'll be linking below. God. And give Chris some of your time. And if you want to hear more from Chris, other than the podcast, like I said, check out the most recent Physical Media Advocate. Chris has his first column in there, and it's pretty damn great.
It's all about Indian cinema, so I'm hewing very close to brand here.
I love that I volunteered to be on an episode of that, and you're like, really?
I mean, most of the time I have to like convince people because they're like, "Oh, I've never seen an Indian movie." It's like, okay,
right.
Well, you set the bar in the right spot. So,
well, thank you again. I hope everybody likes this, and we'll have to be talking about Hell House LLC pretty soon.
I guess so. Yeah, we'll have to re-embark. What we'll have to do is we'll have to watch Hell House LLC, and then you need to watch. We have to just do all three.
All three, okay.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, because you haven't seen them, so
nope.
And it's been, I think I've seen all of them one time. Man, Steve Cognetti, would you like to join us as well? I'm sure it's been a while since I don't know, he hasn't done anything else, has he? I mean, I think so. It's those. I mean, those are three pretty good movies. So don't ever do it. If you don't ever do anything else, just don't go make a Blair Witch sequel.
On that note, thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time. Have a good one. Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.